The year was 1968. A single stage, a black leather suit, and a man the world had nearly buried in memory. Elvis Presley stood under the harsh glow of television lights, sweat beading on his brow, a guitar slung across his body like a weapon. For years, critics had laughed him off as a relic, a Hollywood puppet trapped in shallow films, a once great king turned into his own parody. But on this night, he wasn't just back, he was fire incarnate. The first strum cut through the silence like a blade. His voice roared, not polished, not restrained, but raw, fierce, almost desperate. The audience, and the millions watching at home, were stunned. They had come expecting nostalgia. Instead, they saw rebirth. Elvis Presley was no longer just an entertainer. He was lightning itself, striking with a force that reminded the world why he once terrified parents and electrified their children. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, a boy in Freehold, New Jersey, sat transfixed. His name was Bruce Springsteen. Skinny, awkward, and uncertain of his place in the world, he saw in Elvis something no teacher, no father, no preacher had ever shown him. Music wasn't just sound. It was rebellion. It was salvation. It was destiny. Springsteen would later remember it vividly, how Elvis seemed to tear down walls with a single shake, how he gave a voiceless boy permission to dream. In that moment, the story would be told, Bruce saw his escape, and the world unknowingly witnessed the birth of its next Thunderbolt. But here lay the question that would define a generation. Elvis had been lightning, sudden and shocking, blazing across the American sky. Could Bruce, this boy with calloused hands and a battered guitar, become the thunder that carried it forward? Because lightning may start the fire, but thunder makes sure the world never forgets. The 1950s in America, a country dressed in gray suits and rigid smiles, living under the watchful eye of conformity. Television families sat neatly at dinner tables, fathers with stern gazes, mothers with polite silence, children reciting prayers before bed. But beneath the polished veneer, tension simmered, racial segregation, youth rebellion, the cracks of a culture straining against its own rules. Then came Elvis Presley. At first, he was just another name on Sun Records, a boy with slick hair and a southern drawl. But when he stepped in front of a microphone, something uncontainable erupted. He didn't just sing, he moved. His hips swayed, his legs buckled, his entire body became rhythm incarnate, and America, unprepared, convulsed. Headlines screamed, Elvis the Pelvis, vulgar or visionary. Churches denounced him as the devil's child. Parents warned their daughters to look away, terrified of a freedom his body suggested. But the teenagers, they couldn't get enough. Concerts turned into riots of shrieks and tears, a frenzy never before seen in American music. What Elvis did went beyond scandal. He crossed forbidden lines. He took the raw soul of black gospel and rhythm and blues and fused it with country twang, creating something that broke down racial barriers, even if the nation wasn't ready to admit it. He carried the voices of the oppressed into living rooms that had never dared to listen. Meanwhile, in Freehold, New Jersey, a young Bruce Springsteen lived in a different kind of silence. His father, Douglas, worked factory jobs that suffocated dreams. The house was heavy with unspoken resentment, the television flickering quietly in the background, while Bruce stayed upstairs with a cheap guitar that barely stayed in tune. For Bruce, Elvis wasn't just an entertainer. He was a crack of light through the suffocating walls of a working-class town. Imagine it, a boy staring at static television images of this southern rebel, hips moving like lightning, voice dripping with both lust and liberation. In Freehold, factories belched smoke. In Memphis, a king was rewriting the rules. Bruce later confessed, Elvis didn't just sing. He opened a door. That door wasn't just about music. It was about the possibility of escape, from silence, from disappointment, from the weight of a father's disapproval, and a town that never believed in more than survival. In the 1950s, Elvis shook the world awake. In the 1960s, that tremor still reached boys like Bruce, who clutched their guitars like lifelines. But here's the haunting truth. If Elvis could ignite a cultural revolution, what would happen to the boy who dared to walk through the door he cracked open? The boy who once sat mesmerized by Elvis on a television screen soon found himself in battle with silence. Bruce Springsteen's home wasn't filled with music. It was filled with the sound of disappointment. His father, weary from factory shifts and failed promises, often sat in the kitchen smoking in the dark, a shadow that seemed to swallow Bruce's dreams whole. His mother, Adele, was gentler, a light trying to shield her son. But in the house on Randolph Street, dreams were luxuries. Work was survival. Yet Bruce had already glimpsed another world. The lightning of Elvis Presley had struck, and Bruce couldn't shake it. He scraped together coins to buy his first guitar, and when he held it, it felt less like an instrument and more like a weapon, his chance to fight the silence. He practiced until his fingers bled, pressing steel strings into calluses, strumming until his hands cramped. He played in dingy bars, sometimes to audiences who didn't care, sometimes to empty chairs. He faced rejection after rejection, each one echoing his father's harshest words. "You'll never make a living with that guitar." But inside, Bruce carried a vow. He wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. Meanwhile, his hero, the man who had lit the fire, was fading. Elvis was trapped in Las Vegas residencies, wearing rhinestone suits under the blinding glare of casino lights. The raw, leather-clad rebel of '68 was slowly being buried under the weight of management contracts, money-hungry handlers, and the suffocating demands of an industry that no longer respected him. Critics sneered at his movies, mocking what they saw as a manufactured king. Bruce, still clawing his way through the shadows of obscurity, saw it clearly. The man who once embodied freedom was now a prisoner. That realization burned, because Bruce knew he didn't just want to be Elvis, he wanted to be more. Years later, he would put it into words: "Elvis freed your body before he freed your soul." For Bruce, that wasn't enough. He wanted to free something deeper, the aching hearts of the working class, the restless youth who lived in small towns like Freehold, waiting for something, anything, to break them loose. The thunder inside him was building. Bar by bar, stage by stage, Bruce began to channel not only Elvis's fire, but also his own storm. He wasn't smooth like Elvis. He was sweat, grit, and blue-collar bruises. If Elvis was lightning, Bruce's destiny was thunder, slower, heavier, rolling across the sky long after the flash had gone. But the question remained, could a boy from a suffocating Jersey town really carry the weight of Elvis's spark into a new generation? By the mid-1970s, America was cracked and weary. The Vietnam War had left scars too deep to heal. Watergate had shredded trust in leadership, and the working class felt abandoned, standing in unemployment lines as factories closed their doors. The dream of America was fraying, and millions of young men and women were left wondering if freedom was just a myth whispered in songs. Into this silence, Bruce Springsteen emerged with a cry. He had clawed his way out of Freehold's shadows, forming the E Street Band, playing marathon sets in clubs where the floorboards shook from the weight of their sound. Each show was more than music. It was survival, an exorcism of everything Bruce had carried since childhood. His voice wasn't smooth like Elvis, it was cracked and aching, a howl that came straight from the factory floor and the broken streets. Then came Born to Run. Released in 1975, it wasn't just an album, it was a declaration. With its opening track, Thunder Road, Bruce gave America an anthem that felt like salvation. A harmonica cried, a piano rose, and then his voice, desperate, alive, filled with hope and heartbreak all at once. The song was an invitation, not just to one girl in the lyrics, but to everyone listening. It's a town full of losers, and I'm pulling out of here to win. It wasn't polished rebellion like Elvis shaking his hips on national TV. It was raw thunder, rolling across a wounded America. Critics hailed Springsteen as the new Dylan, but Bruce rejected the label. For him, Dylan was poetry. His own spark came from Elvis. The same lightning that had struck him in 1968 was now coursing through his veins, transformed into thunderbolts pounding through amplifiers and sweaty live shows. The parallels were undeniable. Elvis had once swaggered across stages, hips alive with rebellion. Bruce mirrored it not with pelvic shakes, but with sweat, with veins bulging in 4-hour performances that left him drained on stage floors. Where Elvis's fire had shocked, Bruce's thunder endured. But there was tension too. Elvis had become a prisoner of the very stage he once ruled. Could Bruce avoid the same fate? Could he stay true to the promise he'd made, to never let the industry bury him alive? For Bruce, Thunder Road wasn't just a song, it was a vow. To never let the lightning of Elvis fade into silence. To transform it, amplify it, and thunder it across generations that needed hope. Yet, the road ahead carried shadows, because no vow, no matter how loud, could stop the inevitable moment that was coming, the day when Elvis Presley would be gone forever. August 16, 1977. The world woke to a headline it couldn't believe: Elvis Presley dead at 42. The king of rock and roll, the man who had once set fire to American culture, was gone. Found in his Graceland mansion, his heart silenced by years of abuse, exhaustion, and the crushing weight of being Elvis Presley. For millions, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Bruce Springsteen was on tour when the news broke. That night, he walked onto the stage, his band waiting behind him, his crowd buzzing with anticipation. But before the first chord rang out, Bruce took the microphone, his voice trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley has died." The words cut like knives. Gasps echoed through the arena. Some fans wept openly. Others sat frozen, unable to imagine a world without the man who had once seemed immortal. Bruce himself was visibly shaken. This wasn't just an announcement. It was a farewell to the man who had shown him the way out of silence, the man whose fire had sparked the thunder in his chest. Later, Bruce would say, "It was like Elvis had died and taken America with him." For him, it wasn't simply the loss of a musician, it was the collapse of an era, a reminder that even lightning burns out. Yet Bruce's connection to Elvis went deeper than fandom. Once, in the restless years of his early fame, he had tried to climb the gates of Graceland in the middle of the night, desperate to meet the man who had changed his life. Security stopped him, but the pilgrimage spoke volumes. For Bruce, Elvis wasn't just an idol. He was a spiritual father, a guiding flame. And now that flame was gone. Across America, mourning turned to reflection. Elvis had been worshipped, ridiculed, adored, and abandoned. His final years were tragic, a reminder of what happens when genius is trapped in chains of fame and exploitation. But even in decline, his presence was so vast that his death felt like a national wound. For Bruce, the message was clear. If Elvis was lightning, it was now up to him to be thunder, to carry the sound forward, not as imitation, but as transformation. The crowd that night didn't just hear a tribute. They heard the passing of a torch, because in the echo of Elvis's death, Bruce realized the weight of his own role. The king was gone. The boss had to rise. But could thunder really survive where lightning had failed? After Elvis's death, the shadow of the king loomed larger than ever. For Bruce Springsteen, it wasn't just about mourning a hero. It was about honoring him in the only way that mattered, keeping the spirit alive on stage. And Bruce did it with a ferocity that bordered on madness. His live shows became legend. 4-hour marathons where sweat poured from his body like baptism, where every note was played as if it might be the last. He didn't just sing, he exercised. He carried the fire of Elvis but reshaped it into something grittier, something working class, something built not on rhinestones but on rust and steel. Critics began to notice. Some whispered that Springsteen was Elvis reborn for the industrial age. Where Elvis had once embodied the wild, unchained rebellion of youth, Bruce embodied the grinding resilience of the working man. He was thunder for a generation that no longer believed in lightning strikes, only in storms that rolled on through hardship. But authenticity came at a cost. Elvis had been accused of selling out, of letting Hollywood and Vegas strip him of his soul. Bruce fought tooth and nail to avoid that fate. Record executives tried to box him in, demanded pop singles, demanded radio-friendly cuts. Bruce pushed back. He was notorious for battles over his music, delaying albums until they were perfect, refusing to let anyone else dictate the truth of his sound. The struggle defined him. Where Elvis surrendered to contracts and handlers, Bruce drew blood in boardrooms, determined never to be a prisoner of his own fame. And the audiences knew it. Night after night, they saw a man who gave everything, voice cracking, body trembling, heart on the line. Every thunderbolt he struck carried echoes of Elvis's lightning, but it was transformed. Bruce himself never denied the lineage. He openly said, "There have been a lot of tough guys. There's only been one Elvis." The humility was real, but so was the weight. Because whether he admitted it or not, every time he picked up a guitar and let his thunder roll, the DNA of Elvis Presley ran through his veins. In stadiums filled with tens of thousands, you could feel it. The king was gone, but the echo remained, and Bruce was its vessel. Yet even as he carried Elvis's fire, Bruce knew the danger. Lightning fades. Thunder can grow faint. The question was no longer whether he could honor Elvis. It was whether he could endure where Elvis had fallen. Because the echo of thunder may carry across generations, but only if someone is strong enough to keep beating the drum. Elvis Presley was lightning, sudden, shocking, impossible to ignore. He struck in an instant and changed the sky forever. His energy was pure fire, a blaze that seared itself into history before burning out too soon. Bruce Springsteen was thunder. He didn't arrive in a flash, but he rolled across the landscape, heavy and unrelenting. Where Elvis exploded, Bruce endured. Together, their story isn't just about music. It's about what happens when one generation passes its spark to the next. For Bruce, Elvis wasn't just a sound. He was an escape hatch. A way out of silence, out of small-town ceilings, out of a life where dreams weren't supposed to survive. Elvis lit the fuse. Bruce carried the blast. And in doing so, he gave millions of voices to people who thought no one was listening. Even now, decades later, you can still hear it. In every stadium where fans raise their fists to Thunder Road. In every moment when a young musician picks up a guitar, desperate to be heard. The lightning of Elvis. The thunder of Bruce. The eternal echo of music's power to break chains, ignite hope, and transform lives. But here's the question I'll leave you with. Who was your Elvis? Who lit the fire that changed your life, that showed you there was something more than silence? Because the king may be gone. The boss may grow older, but the echo remains, waiting for each of us to hear it, to carry it forward, to make sure the thunder never dies. The king is gone, the boss remains, and together their echo is eternal.